This is the 2019 Lamborghini Urus, and it is the latest Lamborghini. But unlike basically every other Lamborghini model, this isn't a wedge-shaped sports car. Instead, it's an SUV. Yes, that's right, Lamborghini is now in the SUV business. I've borrowed this Urus from O'Gara Coach here in La Jolla, California. They're the Lamborghini dealership here in the San Diego area, among other brands, and they always seem to have the coolest cars. Now, the Urus isn't officially on sale yet, but O'Gara has this one as a preview from Lamborghini before the Urus officially goes on sale in September. Unfortunately, that means I can't yet drive the Urus, but I'll check back with a driving review as soon as I can. Instead, today I'm going to take you on a comprehensive tour of the Urus, and I'm going to show you all of its interesting quirks and cool features. There are many. But first, I'll start with an overview. Now, the Urus is powered by a twin-turbocharged V8 that makes 640 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. It's good for a top speed of 190 miles per hour, which makes it the world's fastest production SUV. It'll also do 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, which makes it one of the quickest. Now, pricing hasn't officially been set, but rumors are that it's expected to start around $200,000 before options, and every Urus is equipped with all-wheel drive. And with that, on to the Urus's quirks and features, which are plentiful. And for more of my thoughts on the Urus, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also listed the cheapest used Lamborghini models currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. Now, I'm going to start on the outside of the Urus, and specifically up front with the headlights, and specifically the running lights. You can see when they're on, they look very cool, and they have this distinctive Y shape to them. Now, the cool thing is when you put on the turn signal, it completely takes the place of the running light, and it preserves the Y shape. Now, keep that Y shape in mind for a moment, because as we move along to the rear, you can see that Y shape also exists in the tail lights right here, so they've preserved that design element from the front in the back of the Urus as well. And the Y shape continues on the side of the headlights where it says Lamborghini Technica LED. You can see all those little Ys in there in that entire area just to keep that design theme going. And once again, that continues on the back of the car on the side of the taillights. You can see it again says Lamborghini Technica LED, and again that's in a little space with all the little Y designs to mimic the look of the headlights, the taillights, and the rest of all the Ys. And amazingly, it's the same thing inside the door panel with the speaker cover. Take a look at this. Instead of having traditional holes like every other speaker cover, this has the little Ys to tie the interior into the exterior and the taillight and headlight design language. That is a tiny little quirk that nobody will really notice, but I think it is a really cool look. And as I poked around, I realized it isn't just the speaker cover on the inside. There's also speaker covers on the A-pillars that have the little Ys on them, which is kind of cool. But check this out. The little Ys even appear on the dead pedal, which no one will ever notice ever. But it's just a kind of cool thing if you look at all the little details and you see that Lamborghini cares that much about tying in all the exterior and interior design elements. It's very cool attention to detail. But anyway, moving on from the Y shape, I want to talk more generally about this car styling, and I want to start up front with this area, specifically these little items here. Now, to me, these look like March Madness brackets. Here's what a March Madness bracket looks like, and then here are these things in closer detail, and I promise you, when you see an Urus, you're gonna look at these things and you're not gonna be able to get that out of your mind. But anyway, the rest of the front end is actually really cool. It's very aggressive and pointed and angry, and it looks like an angry bird coming to a point right in the middle with the camera eye right in the front as the all-seeing eye that looks at you. Now, the Urus has had some controversy for its styling, but personally, I think it looks really good, especially in person. I think it looks aggressive and mean, maybe not as crazy as it could have, but it also had to be a practical vehicle. I will say, I do see some Audi, Volkswagen, especially in the rear three-quarters of this car. There were probably hard points that they couldn't really change when they were styling this thing, so they had to keep the basic architecture the same, and it shows. But mostly, I think this is actually a pretty good design. Now, there are a couple of other interesting elements on the outside of the Urus that I think are worth mentioning. I want to start with the tires. These are Pirelli P0 high-performance tires like you'd expect in a car like this, but if you look closely, you can see they have the little Lamborghini L logo on them. These tires are specific to the Urus, I bet your Honda Accord doesn't have special Honda Accord specific tires. Now, there are a couple of other interesting things around back in the Urus, one of which is just how sloped this rear end is. It's like a coupe, frankly. And as a result of that, Lamborghini hasn't installed a rear wiper in this vehicle, which is unusual in a car that has a tailgate. But I guess they feel that it's sloped enough like a sedan or a coupe that they don't have to account for water coming up and hitting the back window like it does in an SUV. So there's no rear wiper. Now, another interesting thing back here is the brake light taillight situation. The brake lights and taillights are normal. The turn signals are normal. They look kind of cool. The weird thing back here is the reversing lights, which are incredibly tiny. They're very bright. So there's no mistaking when you're backing up in an Urus, but they're just really small. They're like the size of a dime. Not sure why, but that's how it is. Now, next we move on to the cargo area, where the Urus has quite possibly the coolest feature I have seen in years. You see these little buttons over here on the side of the cargo area? The buttons in front will lower the Urus when you want to put stuff in it, which a lot of cars have. If you're trying to load something heavy, it can be useful. But the button in back, why, that one will extend the rear tow hitch. That's right, if you press that button, the tow hitch will come out from underneath the Urus and sort of make itself known right in the middle of the back so that you can hook up your Urus to your trailer and you can tow your Lamborghini with your Lamborghini, which is just hilarious. Now, I'm told this option is only available in Europe. This is a Euro model. It won't be on the US Urus models, unfortunately, for all you towing fans. But still, it's cool to see. And it's also cool to see the opposite. If you press the other half of the button, the tow hitch retracts back underneath the bumper of the Urus out of sight until you need it again for heavy-duty towing. Now, aside from the crazy tow hitch extender button, there's not really much particularly unusual back here. It's a cargo area. There's a little cargo management system in there that looks like, I don't know, fences or gates or something, but a lot of cars have that. Beyond that, you have a cargo cover back here with nice stitching, and actually it also serves as a rather complicated cargo divider. There's a little net that separates the passenger compartment from the cargo area so that passengers don't have to be involved with their cargo at all. But otherwise, fairly normal cargo area, although that in itself is kind of abnormal considering this is a Lamborghini. Next, we move under the hood, and this is where you can see the glorious twin-turbo V8, 640 horsepower. Now, one thing I really like about this particular engine is the engine cover on the top of it, it has the firing order. Now, this is something that old Lamborghinis have had for years. The Diablo, the Countach, they all showed the firing order on the engine. And even though this is sort of an Audi-ified Lambo and it's a Lambo SUV, it still keeps that tradition alive, and I think that's kind of cool. One other thing worth noting about the engine is it isn't unique to Lamborghini. This is the same 4-liter twin-turbo V8 you'll find in the Porsche Cayenne Turbo and various other Volkswagen Group models, though it's been heavily updated here. In the Cayenne Turbo, it makes a mere 550 horsepower, 90 less than in the Urus, and 567 pound-feet of torque, 60 less than in the Urus. Now, next up we move on to the interior of the Urus, where there are a wide range of interesting quirks and cool features. I want to start at the very start with the start-stop button. Now, the start-stop button in this car is hidden under a little red cover. You flip up the cover, then you press the button, and then the engine turns on, and that's just cool. Now, the Aventador was the first Lambo with the start-stop button like this, and apparently Lamborghini owners were complaining about having to flip up the little lid every time they wanted to start the car. So for this car, they have a little window inside the lid in case you're really lazy and you don't want to flip up the lid, but you just want to start the engine through the lid. And so you have that option in the Urus. Now, you can see in the area around the start-stop button, there is a bizarre contraption, so we'll move on to that next. That is the gear selector. Well, partially at least. When you pull that whole thing back, it puts the Urus into reverse. That's reverse. Park is a little button to the left of the start-stop button. So you're thinking, well, how do you put it in drive? Well, I sat in this thing for like 4 minutes trying to figure it out myself. It turns out you just pull the shift paddle and that puts it in drive. And by the way, speaking of the shift paddle, they aren't your typical boring sort of curvy shift paddle. Instead, they're very angular and aggressive and they have a cool design to them. But we aren't done with the little contraption next to the start-stop button yet. Moving to the left of the reverse selector, you have a little switch that says Anima on it. And below that, there are 6 different words all in Italian. Well, these are the drive modes. You pull that little switch down in order to switch between the Urus's 6 different drive modes. Now, interestingly, the drive modes are all in Italian, and obviously we get Strada is street, Sport is sport, Corsa is track, but the rest of them, you kind of have to brush up on your Italian before you drive this thing, lest you find yourself in a mode that you don't want to be in. Now, over on the right, there's a switch labeled Ego. This is has your own configurable drive mode, and you can choose the suspension, the steering, the chassis, the dynamics however you want it. And so instead of going into the Lamborghini preset drive modes, you press Ego if maybe you want fast steering but a comfortable chassis, and you can do that. And that is the situation with everything in the middle. Now, speaking of the middle, it's worth mentioning there are a few rather unusual quirks I want to cover before I go any further, and one of them is the hexagons. The interior of this car is full of hexagons. Some are rather hidden. For example, the center of the steering wheel is a six-sided object. The cup holders are in a little hexagon silver piece. Same with this little area of switches and buttons. But there are also some that are a little bit more obvious. For example, the climate control vents are hexagons. The dashboard has sort of a hexagon motif to it. And once you start noticing those, you really start noticing them everywhere. For example, the seat isn't just a nice, well-stitched seat. It's a seat full of hexagons. The mirror is shaped like a hexagon. Interestingly, there are also hexagons in the area around the climate vent sliders to open or close the climate controls. And then maybe my favorite piece, the climate controls. You go in to the little climate control touchscreen and you can see the piece where you adjust the temperature up and down. Even that is a hexagon. And it gets better still. Check this out. The little item to turn the climate controls on or off isn't just a regular on-off button, it's a hexagon-shaped on-off button. Now, other interesting items inside this car. Obviously, this car has a push-button starter, and a lot of these cars with push-button starters, when you turn them off, you haven't fully turned them off, the accessories are still on, which can drain the batteries. Lamborghini, they've thought about this, and when you turn the car off, but the accessories are still on, the door handles light up in red. It's kind of a weird little quirk or Easter egg you might not notice. Now, when you turn the car back on or off, the door handle red lighting goes away because you're no longer in danger of running down your battery by leaving on your accessories. Now, one item I don't like, right above the center touchscreen for the climate controls in this car, there are 4 little switches. They turn off traction control, put on the hazard lights, the defroster. Frankly, I think these are kind of odd. First off, it looks like there are blank switches here, which you never want in a car this expensive, but also they kind of show dust and collect dust a little more than you would want. Not my favorite thing, but it's really the only drawback, in my opinion, to the interior. One major benefit to the interior in this car is the leather, which is just absolutely beautiful. The seating leather is soft and gorgeous, and it has this nice, rich Italian leather look to it. But forget about that. How about the leather on the door panels and the pillars? It has this nice brown, rich look. It looks like a tremendously expensive Italian leather sofa. The leather is truly incredible, very beautiful. Now, next up, we move on to the infotainment system. And I will note, this car has a very similar infotainment system to the new Audi A8, since they're in the same family and they're both brand new. But there are a couple of quirks unique to the Urus. One is that if you press Lamborghini Anima, it actually goes through each of the drive modes and shows a picture of what they are. So if you're a little behind on your Italian, you're not really sure which one is snow mode, you go in there and then you can easily figure it out. Now, another interesting item in there, when you go into vehicle information, it shows like all sorts of vehicle information that you'd expect from an off-roader SUV. You have your tilt angle from the front, from the back, from the sides. It shows the exact position of the vehicle. It shows the steering angle. It shows the coordinates that you are at this exact moment, as if you're going on some off-roading adventure with your Urus. And who knows, some people may, although I strongly suspect they won't. Next up, moving on to background lighting, you can choose the interior ambient lighting color in this car, just like in so many others. The interesting thing in this one is it has the names all in Italian. So once again, you don't really know what they are until you click on them and you kind of see the picture explaining what it is, unless you're up on your Italian colors. Rosso, that one I know. Next up, going into sound settings, there's a little item in there called volume of spoken cues. You go in there and you can change the volume of spoken cues, like when there's some sort of spoken warning. That's not all that unusual. A lot of cars have that. The interesting thing is, when you're playing with it, it actually says volume of spoken cues over and over again. Take a listen.
Volume of spoken cues. Volume of spoken cues. Volume of spoken cues.
By the way, while I was playing with that, did you notice something? Look closely in the background, and yes, that's right, those are hexagons. Now, another interesting item, when you go into the navigation system, you can see that even your icon showing where you are is a hexagon in this car, because the hexagon theme permeates everything. One other really cool feature in the infotainment system, this car has a really cool 3D camera system. I've mentioned this in previous videos. Basically, it shows exactly what your car is doing from the outside, like a video game or a little helicopter is hovering over your car with a camera. Now, I've mentioned it a lot, so I won't go into all the details, but this one has a really cool quirk to it. Take a look, it actually shows what's happening with the lighting. When I have my foot on the brakes show in the 3D camera. When I put on my right turn signal, the right turn signal shows up as on in the 3D camera. When I put on my left turn signal, the left turn signal is on. And when you move the camera system around to the front, the high beams come on when I flash them. I put on the headlights and they come on in the 3D camera. That is hilarious attention to detail. I love it. It is a very cool quirk. Now, far more interesting to me than the infotainment system is the gauge cluster, which is among the most configurable I've ever seen in any car. Now, when you're in just Strata mode, that's street mode, regular mode, you can see it's a fairly normal gauge cluster. It shows the radio station you're listening to, the time and date, whatever. That's when you're just driving along normally. Now, when you shift into sport mode, you can see things heat up a little bit. The G meter appears over on the left, and the tachometer changes color from boring blue to sort of an orange. It's a little sportier, but check this out. Shift into Corsa mode, and then things get really exciting. The tachometer becomes way more visible in the middle, and over on the left, you have access to the power and torque meter showing your instant power and torque. Over on the right, the G meter is there, but now it's larger than it was before. Corsa is for racetracks. When you're tracking your Urus, you will use this mode. Now, check this out. When you start going into the bottom three modes, those are the off-roading modes, you see like your incline and your tilt angle, and it shows the power split, front and rear of the torque to let you know if you're in four-wheel drive. But here's my favorite thing. When you go down to the bottom, Nev, that's snow mode. And in that case, everything's the same except the ground turns white because now you're in snow, and that is very funny. It's a cool little touch, a little Easter egg. Again, most people won't notice, but it is a fun quirk of the Urus.
Another fun quirk of the Urus, look back behind all those fancy gauge cluster displays, and what do you see in the background? Oh yes, that's right, hexagons!
Next up, we move on to the back of the Urus, where there's a couple of interesting things. Now, first off, legroom is actually pretty good. The front seat is where it normally would be, and I fit just fine, and I'm 6'4". However, I will say headroom is a bit challenged. I fit, my head is not hitting the ceiling, but it's just shy. This isn't a giant SUV in back. Obviously, the sloped roof hurts it a little bit. One very interesting thing I find back here is that the interior materials in back are just as nice as they are in front. You have the same incredibly high quality leather with the same hexagon pattern stitched in, and it's the same on all of the sides of the car too. On the door jambs and everything, you have this really nice Italian sofa leather. They even decided to make the cargo divider really nice leather with really nice stitching in between, once again, in the hexagon pattern. It really is an impressive interior, even in the back seats. This is my first time seeing and being around an Urus, and I have to say, it looks really nice. I'm blown away by how nice this car is. Now, speaking of that cargo divider, it's worth noting there is a little ski pass-through there. You can see it kind of cut out from the center. So if you want to put a long, slender item through the middle of the cargo area, you can do that. Other interesting items in the back of the Urus. Apparently this car can seat 5 people if you want. This one is configured to only seat 4 with 4 individual bucket seats and a center console here. But if you're looking for a little more practicality from your Lamborghini SUV, you can get it in this car. Now there is a screen at the back of the front center console for climate controls. This car has 4-zone climate controls, so each rear passenger can set their own climate control and also turn on their heated seats. Meanwhile, in the rear center console, it lifts up to reveal a rather large storage area, and there are 2 cup holders back here, of course, placed in a hexagon area. Now, one other interesting item in the back, there are these little tablets in the back of the front seats. You can detach them, and when you do, you can sort of take it in your lap and play around with all sorts of stuff. You can change the navigation destination, you can change the radio station, you can even look at various car functions like how fast you're going and how long you've been traveling and what your current coordinates are, which is kind of cool. This tablet also has the ability to browse the internet. You can go on Google, Wikipedia, autotrader.com/oversteer, and you can check Gmail, all from the safety and comfort of your rear seat in your Urus. One thing I like about the tablets, when you remove the tablet from the back of the front seat, it still shows the Lamborghini logo right there, so that even if the tablet isn't in place, you remember that you're driving a high-quality Lamborghini. And so that's the Lamborghini Urus. Now, like I said, the Urus isn't officially on sale, so I can't drive this one. But as soon as it goes on sale, I'll be back with a thorough driving review, and I'll give it a Doug score. For now, Lamborghini fans can rejoice at the fact that there will soon be a more practical way to enjoy their favorite brand. The button back here, why, that one will extend the rear lid. And that is the situation with everything in the middle. Now, speaking of the situation, I should mention, I don't know where I'm going with that, but check this out. Shift into Corsa mode and then things get really exciting. Over on the left, you can see, I can't remember what you can see. I wrote it down.